Do you know, the thing here is that government, they know nothing about management. What they have experience of is policies, and somehow they think that you introduce a policy and magically it will happen. But of course it doesn't happen, because unless something is managed, it doesn't happen. The policy therefore doesn't work because it isn't managed, and 2 years down the road there's another policy, and the whole process just goes through the same machinations over and over and again. And I promise you, 10 years from now we'll be looking at the same thing.
Well, Sir Gerry Robinson is here along with the Chief Executive of the NHS, David Nicholson. Is your anxiety that it's too centralised managerially, or that it's too centralised politically?
No, it's politically. I don't have a problem with central management. I think if you want something to work well, you need to have a centre which sets the scene for the whole organisation. I don't have a problem with that. I have a huge problem with the fact that it's constantly changing from a political point of view. New ministers, new ideas. You know, one day it's matrons in, next day it's matrons out. There's another new policy for this. There's deep cleaning for that. There's, you know, frankly, I feel sorry for David, because you can run nothing. You can run nothing if every day the policies are changing. It's impossible.
Do you feel you can run things?
I don't think there's any need for Jerry to feel sorry for me, and I think he's absolutely right that in an organisation like the NHS you do need a central direction to make things happen. So I don't think you should feel worried about me at all. I think the issue about politicians is an interesting one, but it seems to me any organisation, public organisation like ours, which has almost £100 billion worth of public money, politicians have a legitimate interest in what happens. It's certainly, as far as, for example, setting priorities are concerned, it seems to me absolutely vital. But I agree with you. What I agree with, Jerry, is that it is very important to give a firm and clear and consistent environment for people to work in. That's absolutely right.
He's right. I mean, this is public money. We all have to pay our taxes. Is it not right that people we elect to go into government have some control over what happens to them?
I don't have a problem with control. What I have a problem with is constant interference, a constant changing of the goalposts. That's what I have a problem with.
Do you feel constantly interfered with?
I don't think that's the issue for me. I mean, there is no doubt we've gone through a process in the NHS. No, we've gone through. I'm a manager. You know, I want to change the NHS, and it seems to me we've gone through a process where we put a huge amount of money into the NHS. The country's put a huge amount of money into the NHS, and the way we've got change is by national targets, is by national top-down targets. We're now moving away from that. I think increasingly NHS managers need to look out to their population and their public locally rather than up to Whitehall.
No, I agree with that.
And it's one of the things I say to managers across the NHS. You know, if you've spent as much time trying to manage your business as you tried to manage the politics, we'd all be happy. So it's a two-way issue, I think.
You know, David, of course we put an awful lot of money into it, and we haven't got the value for it. We really haven't. You know, I don't argue for a minute that targets have had a beneficial impact. In fact, it's one of the few things, in my experience, that's had a beneficial impact. But we have moved from about 50 billion to nearly 100 billion into the health service. We've got some improvement for that, but we have got nothing like the improvement we should have got for that kind of money. The money was spent on huge increase in salaries, with contracts that actually made less sense than they made before, that made people feel less incentivized than they were before. GP systems were paid huge sums of money that they were very delighted to get, but actually had to do less for it.
Those aren't political decisions. They're managerial incompetencies, perhaps, or managerial mistakes. Some of them were, you admit, were managerial mistakes.
I would love to know whether those decisions about salary settlements were made by David and his team, or they were made by the Department of Health.
Well,
I'd love to know that.
But you know, we've been through a process of changing the pay arrangements for most of the staff in the NHS over the last few years, and it was needed. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. If you look at general practice or even consultant medical staff, by any stretch of the imagination, their pay needs to be reformed and changed, and that's what we've been doing.
What about something like the IT system? I mean, the figures you produced on medical records, of course, did make the case overwhelming that you should have some sort of computerization of them. But I mean, this is hardly a great advertisement for the way the NHS is run, is it?
Well, I mean, first of all, there's been enormous success as far as much of the IT system is concerned. One of the things that you showed on the The program, Jerry, was the PACS system, the digital X-ray system, which moves images all around the hospital.
Yeah, but
which
you know,
was part of the national
this is part of the problem.
program.
This is part of the problem. Frankly, you could have probably bought that system for, you know, £20 million. I have no idea. It's not very difficult to get a decent X-ray system, and I bet they're all over the world. What's happened here is what's happened here is we've set up a system. We spent a huge sum of money on it. So far, it's delivered surprisingly little. It's delivered in the simple areas like the GP system, where frankly, what we said to the GPs was pretty well: carry on with the systems you've got at the moment, make them compatible with a bigger system. There's no way, David, that you can argue that anything other than a shambles has happened with that computer system, and it's got in the way of even existing hospital systems not being able to be developed. It was a very, very poor. It's been a very poor exercise.
I'm sorry,
so far.
and I think this is part of the issue. I think, Jerry, is that the NHS is not just about hospitals. You know, there's a huge amount of work that's done in the community primary care and community care, and the system, electronic prescribing. All these things have been put in. Now, I absolutely agree with you. We've had a problem with some of these big systems going into some of the hospitals. And the way we're dealing with it, I think you would probably agree with, what we're going to do is delegate much more responsibility to local hospitals to enable them to manage their own affairs. And that seems to me exactly the right thing to do, because that's the way we'll get the change. But we're learning from that, and we are moving forward.
I didn't look at the systems outside hospitals, and I know that they are simpler systems by definition, because hospital systems are very complex. The system inside the hospital so far has delivered very, very little, and it's cost a huge sum of money. Many private companies have gone bust in the exercise trying to make it happen. It was an appallingly managed exercise by any standards, and somehow, because it's so large, we kind of let it go by.
No, I don't accept that. I mean, there's been a whole series of reports about the IT program. Probably the national IT program, the NHS, has been the most looked at IT program you could possibly imagine. An enormous spend. I mean, in that hospital, you know, we're going to be the first country in the G8 to completely digitalise its X-ray system across the whole country. That's a fantastic thing.
I'd love to believe that. I'd love to believe it. I'd love to see it happen.
Absolutely.
I think we're going to be discussing this again, don't you?
I think so.
I think so. Thank you both very much indeed.